we're saved, or we're saving the stars and stripes for last, because, you know, that's why everyone is here, or so they tell me. Because, I mean, seriously, wouldn't it be nice to feel like completely secure that you as a company are, or at least will be, relevant for the US market? I think so. Here to help us out are, to my left, Fiona Law, partner and patent attorney at Clarkson, expert in protecting inventions by law. I mean, simply put, IP. Philip Siberg, you're CEO at Senzime, which makes medical devices and develops and sells them, in having operations in over 30 countries worldwide, including the US. And Suresh Pai, you're CEO of LamaMed Solutions and managing partner at LamaMed Access, based in San Francisco Bay Area. You're a serial entrepreneur with numerous products launched in the US and multiple exits to publicly traded multinational strategic buyers. Very welcome, all of you. We'll start up light. Except for the money, why is everyone hoping to reach the US market? Fiona, you get to, I mean, whoever have an answer gets to answer, I think.
I know, except that you said except for the money, and that was going to be my answer. So, you know, it's half of the, it's over half of the world global market. Is there another reason? Should it not be first on everybody's? Is that a
either you make it there or you don't make it at all.
There we go.
Suresh, you have to share.
No, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I'm sitting in the U.S., so we always start there because that's what we know, right? And this is where we're facile because it's our country, right? So it's natural for us to go there first.
Okay, so Philip, this is going to be a learning experience for all of us here, I hope. What do you know now that you really wish you would have known when you first set out to put your product on the US market?
You can't do business on the SK943. A lot of Swedes or Scandinavians, we take the Chicago flight for a week. We think, let's go to the US and sell my products. It's never going to happen. You have to go all in. And you have to go all in US. And the learning was we should have started earlier. We should have more money. And it's absolutely the right thing to do. But I think we are still naive Scandinavians on the challenges in the US market. But it's absolutely the right thing.
At the same time, I feel like we heard this 2 days, like, okay, you know, you have to go for it. But then at the same time you say, okay, but wait until you have money and a strategy. Can you develop a little bit on that?
Yeah, back to us Swedes again. We think, okay, if we have the 510K or some regulatory clearance, that's always how we start. We think we have this shiny, perfect product. Let's go sell it. It's the wrong way to do it. Let's start by finding what is the commercial, what is the reimbursement strategy, and what's the value prop we're solving. Then develop the product. Then go find the 510K. Then you launch. And I think we always do it the wrong way. Back to the question. What was it?
No, but I will remind you, both of you gentlemen, to speak slow, because I'm the oldest one, I'm sure, on this panel, so that I can hear you clearly. Suresh, what would be, I mean, because you really done this, I mean, as an American, but you have a lot of experience. What would your key considerations be from the get-go, creating a successful strategy to make it in the US?
Yeah, so for me, it's been a long journey, right? I came up, you know, through big companies, mid-sized companies, eventually a lot of startup companies. I was on the management team of a lot of venture-backed startup companies. Learned a lot in that process, and then eventually around 2008, 2009, started developing deals of my own, and that comes to the heart of your question, which is when we're founding something, the pre-investor, you know, before you talk to anybody about raising capital, you have to have your thesis baked. You need to look at all these details that I think Philip is talking about. What are we trying to achieve, you know, and how are we going to get there? Do we, you know, have the self-awareness to know we have these skills? Do we have it in our team? If we don't, can we get them? And how? And mapping that out from top down and then bottoms up as well. And then doing the work, right? That's the heart of it. You have to go actually then objectively get that information. And if you do that, you become sort of really passionate about it, and the investors can see that. And when you do that, the investment comes, and now it's execution. If you've got the right team in place, you're now in a really good trajectory to succeed because you understand the details, and where you have weaknesses, you've already sort of put things in place to make that something you can get over as you develop your technology.
I think that's really good advice. Were you that wise when you started off?
No, definitely not. My wife will tell you that too, right? I'm still not wise, but I think that you learn that as you go along, right? You go through experiences, good and bad, and you have to learn from those and collect that wisdom over time. At least in my case, I wasn't fortunate to know it, when I was 20, but through that, we actually now have a team of people. It's not just me. I surround myself with people that are smarter than me. And we actually try to fill the different gaps that are required. It takes a village to actually have a successful product that works in the clinic and that's attractive to strategics and then turns into a deal in the future.
Fiona, entering the US market, I have this idea that it is a matter of rather when rather than if you are going to get sued. Am I right there?
I think that's a hotly debated question, and I think you certainly need to think like that. Like looking at most of you today. I mean, I don't know how many have ended up in US litigation. You look relatively calm, so probably not many. But it's startups. You would shoot me if I said put 10 million aside for US litigation. That's not something you're thinking of at this stage. So what should you do? What can you do now? And every defense, it starts with a good offense. So you get your own IP house in order and start thinking about your own patent portfolio. But always having one. That's not to say that you can't think about it, and it's something that you should be thinking about the US market early from day one, and preparing for that.
Suresh, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the foundational elements. Like you're right about that. I think people sometimes look at it as an afterthought, but we see that as a key piece of the value. And before we even start the company, we're thinking about what's going to be unique about this, what kind of IP can we get, and that's an important part of the value when you finally reach a potential deal in the future. And then obviously you have to be able to sell it, so it's also looking at it from a freedom to operate perspective and having clarity that whatever I'm about to do is not going to get encumbered. And that kind of stuff, if it comes up during diligence with an investor, it's a disaster, right? So you have to be really expert in it.
Absolutely. And there are good answers and bad answers. I do a lot of due diligence for investors. And, I'll ask the question, what have you done about FTO? And the answer is not, I haven't looked at it yet, it's too early. That may be true, but you've got to show that you're at least, you're asking for their money, potentially. You've got to show that you're responsible with it and you've taken steps to mitigate those risks. And even as a startup, you can have competitor intelligence, really know your market and know what your competitors are doing and know what's out there. And doing that initially tells you so much about future FTO, and you will look so there's a right way to answer that question. I help clients during their due diligence, and there's a way to impress investors, a right way and a wrong way to answer that question.
What is the right way?
You have to. Sorry, taking over here. I think you need to be IPDD ready from day one. I really do.
Why?
It's never too early to think about an IP strategy, and once you've got your business plan in order, then immediately think, how can you use IP to support that? Because you're going out raising money, you've no product, so what do you have? You have your intellectual property, it's everything. Get IPDD ready. Build your data room from day one, right? Did you? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't be asking the questions, right? But
no, I want you to. That's how it works. What do you say?
I think I think people think it's a very expensive endeavor. You know, FTO, it can be, right, if you want to go crazy on it, but I think that you have to do the work at some level. And there's ways to do it where you don't spend a lot of money. You have to spend some money, but it's a worthy investment because it's going to haunt you later, right? So that effort needs to be made. Like I said, you can't sell your product if somebody has a patent on what you're about to do, right? And you don't want your investor telling you about that, or your strategic counterparty when you're trying to do a deal. They're armed with attorneys. They'll come in and they'll ask you these questions, and you don't want to look like a deer in the headlights during that meeting, right? That's what that's for. It helps you support, you know, what you're doing.
Philip, in your experience, how important is IP on your way to success, hopefully?
Think carefully.
Yeah. I mean, we started the company as we licensed IP from Mayo Clinic in the US. So that's the way we started. It took about 9 months, and then we were into the first lawsuit on the IP. So, and it's all about, like you said, it's having deep pockets, and in this case, we ended up buying the counterpart. It was cheaper to doing that than the litigation. But I've been doing various ventures in the U.S. for 20 years and been in so many IP attorneys and litigations and arbitrations. And it's a tricky one. Often it's the shiniest suits, I feel, that win. It's the best attorneys and not the IP itself. And even though we believe, you know, we're naive Swedes, we think we have the perfect IP. It's all thought about. The Americans are slick. They win anyway, so often.
That's not so good news.
No, but it's about, and I say this to our clients in Scandinavia and in the UK, you've got to think like a US company from day one, and that means, you know, don't think about getting your US IP filed early. They have, this is a bit of a generalization, but probably a lower bar for filing things. It's a little bit more about numbers. I don't advocate that. I still think you should file valuable IP, but you need to think a bit more about what your counterparts in the US are doing, so that you can be on a level playing field.
Yeah, but Fiona, apart from future litigation or IP, what is important to plan for when it comes to protecting your products? I mean, did we cover everything?
You mean what's from...
Is it anything else, I mean, otherwise, when it comes to protecting your IP that we should think about more than litigations?
Well, I think I always hate talking about litigation because I think that's seen as a nasty... Nobody wants to be in it. It's a nasty, it's a cost. I think of your IP as an asset, and protect it early. And I'm not just talking about patents here. Quite often I advise people not to file patents. You know, I'm talking about your trade secrets and your brand. Start building value in your company early. Think about your own IP.
Which takes me to the next question. You'll have a choice, product or company. What is more important?
Well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. I'm a product guy. And the reason for that is, after a lot of experiences, like I said, we're working with venture-backed firms. I was with one company, I raised over $100 million. Successful product. I was from the technical side in that deal. I wasn't the founder. I was, in the management team there. Product was doing about $80 million of top-line sales in second year out, so it was a good product. But we, ran into a lot of challenges, even on the IP side. We were actually sued by a big public company and had to go fight that, and it was north of $10 million of litigation, and there's some issues that had to be resolved there. As a private company, very difficult. These companies can find themselves upside down in the transactions that still can occur. In this case, it did. The company was acquired for quite a bit of money, a few years later by a big company. For founders and other stakeholders, that have common stock, you may end up with nothing in spite of a transaction, which is surprising, right? But it's because of the machinations of the financing, and that led us to sort of a more of a fast-to-market perspective where, a leaner capital model can still get you to a rational outcome. You know, there's a lot of companies that have a balance sheet that can do a transaction between 50 and 200 million, we'll say. But at that lower edge of the range, a lot of deals get done there. And they can be very good if you're efficient, right? For your stakeholders, your investors, everybody can make money there. And so that sometimes gets lost, I think, in the big picture. And so those are inherently products. They're not companies, right? Because it's like the 15Ks Philip was talking about. We can get those to kind of commercial on a reasonable amount of money. Then it's really, did you pick wisely? Is it a good product? Does it get clinical traction? I'm not trying to build revenue. I'm trying to show almost like symbolic sales, I like to call it. You want to show that you kind of have something that has viability, and it's kind of what your PowerPoint originally said when you started. But the strategic can then take that initial sort of basis and then use their channel, which is really formidable, they've invested in it, and scale it. And that's where you get your synergy for acquisition.
Thank you. Also slow down so I can follow you really well. Philip, I know you care a lot about your product. I also know you care a lot about your company. What do you think when, if you have to make the choice?
I don't think it's the product, it's not the company, it's the value proposition. And it's simply, what value am I bringing to this doctor, physician, and how can he make money on it? And that's all about US. Yes, it's important for the patient, but if there's not a super crisp, clear case for the physician, you're not going to succeed.
But what makes it crystal clear?
I mean, that you have this reimbursement strategy, or that there is a value prop that makes them, radically changes their workflow, or it makes them be able to bill for the device or the solution, or it provides a response to the patient immediately, something that changes, because patients in the US, they want a rapid response to everything. It's not like in Scandinavia where we wait. We're okay to wait 9 months to get an ECG assessment. And if you can help them to change their everyday workflow, then you have something. I think we're too much coming in with the Scandinavian products. I think we can make a difference. It's skip the feature set and find the prop. That's what sells.
Yeah, Fiona, do you have a strong opinion on this?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's the reimbursement strategy. I work a lot in digital therapeutics. It's a real, I never thought I'd end up working in digital therapeutics as a small molecule pharma person. But it's everywhere, and I think it's the next. I mean, I think patent attorneys see the next big thing first, and that is the key there. Is the value proposition. So if you have a new digital therapeutic product, for stopping smoking or something like that, if you're just selling the app for, £1 a go, that's not an investable business. It's about actually being a regulated therapeutic, being reimbursed, having patents and having IP that maps to that. Now, digital therapeutics and patents is a whole other challenging space, but I think that's the single most important thing, surely, is the value and how are they going to make money. I'd very much agree with that.
Okay, so after this will be some drinks, so I think it's fine for us to be a little bit vulnerable, or I am not going to be, but I'll ask you to be. So with this in mind, what would you consider your toughest challenge you faced so far addressing, and I mean now we talk specifically about addressing the US market. Suresh, you want to?
I mean, so many challenges come, I think, when you're developing technology, right? So I can pick a lane, on the regulatory side. A recent deal we did, it was an implant technology. We're taking it through the FDA in a arduous kind of clinical study pathway, but to get that approval to start the study can be quite challenging, right? Just opening the front door with the FDA. And I feel like we have a great team, really smart people, and in spite of that, in that journey, we ran into, 20-page deficiency, from the agency, right? So when that letter comes, it's a dark day, right? So you're kind of thinking, oh my God, right? How are we going to resolve this, right? But that's an example of a challenge that startups will see on their journey to success. That company was acquired last year by a public company in April, so we finally came out of it with a success. But it's an example of many different things that kind of come along the way where you feel like this company could go off the rails. You could be done, right, if you can't answer these questions. And these are incredibly challenging scientific questions that you have to answer, and you have to stay within the boundaries of your money in the bank and your team's capabilities and all the things that kind of exist. You can't really do much more than what you've got, and you have to be resourceful with it. And so that's an example of a regulatory challenge that we've seen and experienced. And having a team that has resilience is what I feel like was something now that I reflect on it. One of our team members is a really great technical person. His response wasn't like, my God, the sky's falling. He was like, I think we can solve this, right? And that made me feel better, right? And so there's a whole thing around that, right, where your team matters, right? When you're making this journey and you run into these incredible challenges, you have to work together to solve them and get to the other side.
I mean, you'll both get to answer the same questions, but before, Suresh, I wonder, when is the time to give up? That say, okay, no, this is not, or you should continue to fight for it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the lane, but we've seen products where, you get a 510K, barrier to entry from a regulatory perspective is pretty low for a 510K. You're comparing yourself to a predicate device, and so, okay, we're there now. We're so-called commercial product. But it doesn't mean it's going to work. We haven't even tried it yet, right? And you're gonna get the market telling you whether your bet is good, right? And that can be where decisions have to be made, because I've seen people pour, more capital on top of those, even when it's very vivid that your thing's not working, right? And so a lot of companies, have to keep that sort of pragmatism, I think, when they reach the kind of early commercial stage on med device in particular with 510Ks, for example. I think the same applies with some of these PMA type of products where you've done clinical work. Clinical studies are great, but a lot of these studies are fairly small, single-arm studies. The data is good, it gives you directionality, but when you put a product in the wild is when you actually get the realities of life, right? The doctors that are going to use it, are you going to get the same sort of real-world data from that? That's where you have to kind of keep an eye on it and make sure you don't continue to pour capital into something that doesn't have a path forward.
Okay, Philip, so you've been at this for a while. Can you take us back to a memory you have of a really tough challenge where you were doubting things?
Yeah, I mean, some of these IP issues have been challenging, absolutely. But I think one common is finding the right people and finding. You guys in the US generally are brilliant speakers and brilliant presenters, but it's hard to really, for us naive Swedes, to find who is actually the right person for us. And I mean, taken the approach over the years I've moved to the US 3 times to help set up the business and then ultimately recruit and find the right people on being there and then going back, because it's so hard for us here to find the right US guy or girl to run the business. Because we are different. We got to find people that understand us and then we understand them. Because ultimately it's like we're coming with some product or something we want to sell, and there needs to be a very crisp manual. This is how you do it, and this is what you're selling. The general American is super good at doing something which is very focused. And I think we are a little bit of everything. Not so focused always, but
do you consider that to be like the specific problem that Scandinavians have in the US?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I've hired so many people over the years that I've just been, wow, this guy seems fantastic. 4 weeks later, nothing happened. So it's.
Oh no! Now I understand the naivety.
Yeah. So this is probably an advertising for recruitment guys, but I think that's why it's so good to be there on site. Again, saying this, you can't just go there for a week and think you're going to solve the world's problems. You have to really go bold and all in US and make sure you have the funding, that you have the board with you, and that you have the stretch. It's going to take time. It's going to cost a lot of money, and you're going to be hit down, and you're going to have like opportunities all over the U.S. flying around. You're going to have a gold card on every flight, but are you getting anywhere? So it's coming back to focus and dare to focus. Maybe just focus on the big metropolitan New York region and go there. Don't do all of U.S. at once.
Yeah, good advice. Fiona, what would you consider the toughest challenge in the U.S.?
Do you know, I've preached about the importance of a U.S. patent is the holy grail. It's really important. There's, you know, I would say, you know, as a European attorney, I'd probably say it's the most important. Not having a granted U.S. patent is a red flag. And you know what? I would say, and my biggest challenge is they can be, if you get the wrong examiner, they can be hard to get. And I don't know if you've had experience of this, but sometimes if you're stuck with, quite frankly, a stupid, stubborn examiner, there's not a lot you can do apart from keep throwing money at it. And it's awful for startup companies. So I do wish I think in Europe it's a very good patent system. The US patent system leaves a lot to be desired, but you've just got to play the game. So you just got to play the game and get it granted, because once you do, you get that first one granted, you get more and more, and then, you know, but that to me is always a challenge.
Good, give us a tough love, Fiona. God knows we need it. But on a lighter note then maybe, is there something like a Nordic card that we could play and should play more often?
The Nordic card. I mean, I've got through 510K or through the FDA with just real-world Swedish data. And it works. You don't have to use fancy US trials. And I think Swedish clinical data sells. When I was in a cardiology venture, my brag was this is Swedish. It comes from, and it's proven, and it's built, and it was actually built here in Lund, and that made a lot of physicians go, wow, cool, And also when we presented this to the FDA, their only objection was, okay, but you all Swedes, don't you all look the same, and blah, blah, blah. So give us some demographics to just show that these people are actually a little bit different. And which we did, and FDA said, fine, okay, let's go for it.
I mean, we like to see ourselves as, high in quality and reliable. Suresh, is that our rep over the seas?
No, definitely. I think, there's nothing negative if that's what you're fishing for. I think that people basically, in the U.S., I think they're going to look at the merits, right? So if you're presenting yourself, you come prepared, you have good data, you have good story to tell, you filled in the details. I don't think it matters whether you're Swedish or from any other country. I think they're going to look at, are you doing all the right things? Are you taking this seriously? And it's the same thing that you would see from a successful American entrepreneur, right? So I don't see it as some distinction, from any other country, Swede or otherwise, right?
No, I'm fishing for the best things, not the negative ones.
Very positive. It's like Philip said. I think people think highly of the Swedes. There's nothing negative about that. It's more. I've been listening to some of the talks here. I think you want to kind of come in with that preparation and be assertive about it. That you should. You have good data. You do good work. You have to kind of add all the rest of the elements together, and it will show well. You'll get the investors. You'll be successful with strategics if you do that.
Phew, we can all leave later on with a good feeling, like, oh, otherwise our world would be turned upside down. We can't leave until we raise the most important question. I'll take some extra time for that. If you are looking, and I think most of us are, to exit or partner, how do you maximize the chances of striking a deal in the US?
Yeah, so I think strategics are very smart, right? When you're if you're privileged enough to get at the table with them, with something you've been building, they're going to ask you hard questions, and there's going to be a lot of diligence and a lot of digging, and so you kind of back 6 steps from that. What do you need to do to look like that company that can answer those questions and be successful in that discussion, right? That's how I look at it. So it's exactly what you would see in a business plan or a pitch, right? We know how to make these slide decks and we know how to tell that story, but the substance need to be there, right? And that's what you're going to be, having to defend, I think, at the time of a strategic being interested. So that's how I view it. All those foundational elements that we started with, right, that we said are important to us, you've filled in all those gaps. By the time you're having that discussion, your value goes way up if you've de-risked these things and you have substance. Your team is smart. Oftentimes they'll keep you there, after the transaction to continue working in the integration. The reason is because these are mostly sales and marketing organizations. They want the help for you to keep taking it forward for at least a little while. And that's kind of the key, is just kind of build your organization to look like that, when you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Before you move on, I want to ask, you started with saying, be prepared for some tough questions. Which ones should we be prepared for? Or some standards?
It's like anything, in a corporation, right? All the cross-functionality. So there's VP of this, VP of that, right? So there's going to be manufacturing and operations people that care about your scale, and can you make it? Can you make it cheaply enough to make a margin that matters? Can you tell us more about the regulatory? Are there any holes? Is your clinical data real, or is there something you're not telling me? Or is there an IP gap? There's so many buckets. You're going to be dealing with their attorneys, their, VP of this and that. And so those are the questions, right? It's classic sort of things that are operationally important to a company, and they're trying to figure out, should I pay a bunch of money to you to get that value? Is it real? And those are the questions you have to be able to answer.
Fiona, what would you say is the best advice to maximize your chances to strike a deal?
I would say dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So think very early about if you want to enter the US, you start to look attractive to the US market. So file your US IP early.
I'm sorry, I have to ask this silly question. Is there a different dress code? Should we dress up or dress down more casually? Or don't you care about that in this world? Philip, be honest with us.
I'm trying to dress down because some Americans dress up and be different. Yeah.
They go all power suit, don't they?
Sure. No, but Philip, please close this with your best advice.
Be super self-confident. Play big. Dare to take risks. Have a brilliant IP strategy. And then in the med device world, get to $10 million in sales. Then you can do whatever you want. And then prove and tell the story that your customers are making money. And once they do that, and patients are happy and everybody, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Either you scale up yourself or you get acquired by somebody.
Thank you so much for the inspiration. Philip Siberg, Fiona Law, Suresh Pai, thanks for coming.
Thank you.